Hey guys, I'm learning TFT. In this video, I'm going to go through a deep dive guide on how to select your 2-1 augment. I'm going to go through some key questions as far as whether your board is strong or weak, whether you want immediate or delayed strength, how important it is to get carousel priority, and how do your encounters influence the augment decision. And so I have kind of like a workflow, a bunch of scenarios to go over, and we will also do a deep dive into a bunch of the regionals final day games by Dankmemes and Dish Soap. Specifically going into 2-1, I took a bunch of screenshots and scenarios to use this kind of workflow type situation so that you can have a clearer game plan. And this is all patch agnostic and set agnostic, so that going into set 14, you should be able to benefit from having this guide to help you decide how to make better decisions on 2-1. So before I do that, I'm going to go into the meta mindset of the day. This section in all my videos is designed to help you get better at TFT. It's a way that goes into kind of the inner game, how to win the inner game so that you can win the outer game of TFT. And as a way to also help you in life, since I believe TFT is a great metaphor for life. Today's meta mindset of the day is gratitude as an antidote to tilt, since it's very common for us to see, top streamers go on tilt. I am guilty of this, and I suspect that you have probably experienced some form of tilt as well. So not only will this be useful for you in life, but gratitude as a way to combat tilt to help preserve your LP when you are going through downswings. If you would like to jump straight to the 2-1 augment guide, I will provide a timestamp in the description below, so feel free to jump ahead if you want to skip this section. All right, so meta mindset of the day, gratitude. I'm gonna keep this picture with us so that we can keep it in mind. So Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough said, the Oxford English Dictionary defines gratitude as the quality or condition of being thankful, the appreciation of an inclination to return kindness. And it comes from the Latin root meaning pleasing. David Rock and Linda Page talked about how research shows that keeping a gratitude journal, that is, counting your blessings by writing them in a journal once each week for 6 weeks, there was research done that showed that that significantly increased your overall satisfaction with your life. And a control group that did not keep a journal did not show a gain like that. C.S. Lewis, the author, said that nearly all vices are rooted in the future. Gratitude looks to the past and love to the present. Fear, avarice, lust, and ambition look ahead. Albert Clark said, in our daily lives, we must see that it is not happiness that makes us grateful, but gratefulness that makes us happy. And I wanted to include this one because I've been working with Marcel P a lot, and I initially asked him if his username was a call out to Marcel Proust, but it's actually his real name, Marcel P. But Marcel Proust said, let us be grateful to people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom. And so when we look at these ideas on gratitude, we can see that a lot of happiness and being satisfied with your life in large part happens because we take the time to show appreciation for what we have instead of constantly looking forward into what we don't have. And when we think about TFT, and I'll talk about the hedonic treadmill, this idea here is a lot of times we can constantly be thinking about more, what rank we want, what LP we want, what we want to accomplish in a tournament. And we can forget that getting to that point is not necessarily going to make us happy. because we're constantly looking into the future. What makes us happy is actually gratefulness in what we have accomplished in the past and where we are in the present. And just as importantly, if not more importantly, it's the people who are along in the journey with us in life. And that's why I really enjoy TFT as a community, because I found that this game specifically, relative to many other games I've played, it attracts a certain type of personality. And the people I've come across, including many of you viewers on YouTube, I really appreciate those of you who have reached out to me, whether that's responding in a comment, interacting with the video in some way, DMing me on Discord. It's really about the people along the ride who make our lives more fulfilling. You could think about, whether you hit the next rank in TFT, like sure, you're going to feel happy for a moment, but that passes. And the people that really love and care about you in your life could really care less about what rank you hit in TFT, right? Like that's all ego. That's all a sense of wanting to accomplish some sense of status. And it's great to have challenges and dreams and goals in your life. But the people that truly care about you would not give two flying shits about whether or not you hit a certain rank or goal or status achievement, right? Like the people that really care about you, they're gonna love you regardless of whether you have money or status, or you're a challenger rank, or have 1,000 LP, or you're diamond rank, or if you're iron, right? Like, and so I do want to really call out that having supportive people in your life is extremely important. So then there's this idea of the hedonic treadmill, which is captured here. Daniel Kahneman said in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, Brickman and Campbell's concept of the hedonic treadmill suggests the hypothesis that rapid adaptation will cause the effects of any objective improvement to be short-lived. And so this idea in TFT would be, you can hit a certain rank, but you get used to that. Like when I hit diamond for the first time, I was really happy. I forget what set I hit that. And then Masters was really exciting. And then I got used to that. And then I felt like I was hard stuck there. And it was like, well, Masters isn't good enough. Then it was like, okay, how do I get to GM? And then you get used to that. And so even, the rank that I've hit now, it's like, well, maybe I could get higher. And I've gotten to, top 50 or top 24 last set. And it's like, well, how do I get top 20 or top 10? And like, again, it's great to have these goals because it gives us something to strive for. And that, I think, is interesting because it's energy and motivation. But if you're expecting to achieve some sense of permanent happiness, some sense of, and I think much of this is built into the Christian underpinnings of like constantly sacrificing the present or this world for some sense of future eternal happiness. And I don't necessarily believe that from a religious standpoint, but I think a lot of people, even if you're not Christian, those underlying values of like constantly sacrificing the present for some future feeling that like, oh, if I just do this, if I just do that, if I just get to this rank in TFT, if I just win this game, or if I just get this job, or I just get to this promotion or title or career or whatever it is, that I will finally be happy. Like science has shown us over and over again that that's just not true. We're constantly running on this treadmill. And the moment we get to that next level, you're happy for a moment, you get used to it. And then you're like, well, now what? Right? Kahneman also said that there was a survey done on 450,000 responses, and there was an answer to well-being research: can money buy happiness? And the conclusion is that being poor makes you unhappy, but being rich does not necessarily improve your experienced well-being. It does enhance your life satisfaction, because this is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that pyramid. If you get your kind of basic needs met, safety, food, shelter, etc., that does improve your life satisfaction relative to somebody that is poor and or does not have those basic needs met. But getting to higher levels of experience, well-being, and happiness is not past a certain point correlated with how much money you have or how much money you make. And I would argue that the same is likely true for TFT. The higher rank you get does not necessarily mean you're going to be a happier person. And in fact, in life, there are many people that are very wealthy who are not happy at all because they're extremely lonely, they don't have friends, and they think that if they just get to the next level of hitting, I know people who, because I've worked with startup founders, you make a first million and you're super happy. Then you're like, okay, I need to make 10 million. And then it's like, oh, I need to make 100 million. No, I need to make $1 billion, right? Like there's always someone with more. And you would think that at some point they would be satisfied, but that's the key. It's a treadmill, right? You're constantly running in place. And so that goes to the next point around expectations. Brad Stolberg, in his book, The Practice of Groundedness, said that studies show that happiness is a function of reality minus expectations. The key to being happy isn't to always want and strive for more. Instead, happiness is found in the present moment, in creating a meaningful life and being fully engaged in it, right here and right now. So when you think about this for TFT or for your life, it's not constantly thinking like, oh, my expectation is if I'm at Diamond 1, let's say, I expect to be at Master, right? Like, sure, that could be fine that you have this goal to get to Master, but instead of constantly feeling like, oh, I have to get there, I have to strive for more, right? Happiness is found in the present moment, being fully engaged right here and right now, which means if you're at Diamond 1 and you're feeling frustrated that you're not able to get past, get to Master, be engaged right now, which means focus on what's happening, which includes paying attention to what you might have been able to learn from that game. Paying attention to patterns in your gameplay and recognizing that you're playing this game, and TFT is a game, for the purpose of enjoyment, right? Like, why would we play a game if we weren't at the end of the day having fun? If all our experience with playing TFT was frustration, anger, anxiety, like there were plenty of other things that we could do with our lives that we could get more enjoyment and fulfillment from. And so the whole point of playing a game, and I would argue this is true for life too, is to enjoy the ride that we're on. And so it's a good, useful reminder that gratitude, when we're on the verge of tilt, is the antidote and the solution to figuring out how to get more joy out of our lives. Yuval Noah Harari, in his book Sapiens, said, happiness does not really depend on objective conditions of either wealth, health, or even community. Rather, it depends on the correlation between objective conditions and subjective expectations. So again, this idea that it's your personal expectations and how much that matches with reality that determines how happy you feel. Meister Eckhart, who was a Christian writer from hundreds of years ago, said, Seneca, a pagan master, asks, what is the best consolation in suffering and distress? And gives this answer. It is this, that we should accept everything as if we had desired it and prayed for it. So an acceptance of what has happened instead of a frustration. So when you get a low roll or things don't go your way, or maybe you made a big mistake, lean into that. Accept what happened so that you can learn from it and move on, right? If you really dwell into it and feel like, oh, this is all bad, I should be here, and all of that, that's the situation where you get sucked into the negativity. Lastly, on greed, Naval Ravikant, an entrepreneur and investor, said, desire is a contract that you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Eric Fromm, in his book Escape from Freedom, said, "Greed is a bottomless pit which exhausts the person in an endless effort to satisfy the need without ever reaching satisfaction." And Anthony DeMello, in his book Awareness, said, "There's only one reason why you're not experiencing bliss at this present moment, and it's because you're thinking or focusing on what you don't have. Otherwise, you would be experiencing bliss." So this related to the hedonic treadmill is when you constantly want more and you're not satisfied with what you already have, that's the recipe for suffering and pain. But when you are focusing on what you do have in the present moment, that's where joy and happiness comes from. And so when we're playing TFT, when we're going through a low roll, it's useful to have this reminder to say to ourselves, like, hey, I'm grateful that I have, frankly, luxury time to play a competitive online game when there are people in the world who don't even have this luxury to have, internet access, high speed internet access with a minimum degree like quality computer and free time and money to be able to play a game. Like, there are plenty of people in the world who have to be working basically 24/7 to be able to support their lifestyle. And so regardless of where you are in your life journey and how rich or poor you are, the mere fact that you can play a game and have the time to do that is a sign that, you're fortunate in many ways relative to a large percentage of the population, many of whom live in either poverty or in a war zone or are refugees. Even like Demasian Raptor, I was having a coaching session with him, and he had to actually, or I had a coaching session scheduled with him, and he had like messaged me at the last second, basically saying he had to reschedule because his city was being bombed. Because he lives in Israel, and so yeah, things can get bad sometimes in TFT. We can go on tilt, but just in those moments, it's useful to remind ourselves like we're pretty fortunate to be able to play a game for fun. And that's at the end of the day what we're doing, right? And so you can extend all of these ideas to your own personal life as well. All right, so that covers our meta mindset of the day. And with that said, let's go into our Augment guide. So I already talked about the key questions. And this is like kind of the basic recipe I want to talk about when it comes to 2-1 Augment selection. So if you are strong, meaning you have 2-star units, oftentimes, and this is like kind of a sliding scale, right? So if you have like 3 or 4 2-star units, you're extremely strong. If you have 1 2-star unit, you're like okay strong, and 2 2-star units, you're like reasonably strong, right? But strong doesn't just mean 2-star units. It also means you have slammable items that can magnify the strength of your 2-star units. And if you are strong, meaning you have 2-star units and slammable items on them, then you likely want to lean towards item augments on your 2-1 so that you can magnify the strength of your units, because then you could get 2 or maybe 3 items on a single unit, which gives you a very high likelihood of full streaking. Stage 2, which should generate you a lot of gold, right? So like full streak stage 2 generates you 1 gold for a 1 streak, 2 gold for a 2 streak, 2 gold for 3 streak, 2 gold for 4 streak, and then 3 gold for 5 streak. So that's 2, 4, 6, 9, 10 gold, right? 10 gold for stage 2, which like is basically about the same amount as like a silver econ augment, right? So you can imagine that if you have this kind of start, it gives you both item and 10 gold. And the reason you would prioritize item is that an item will usually have more stats than like a generic combat augment, which Dish Soap has mentioned many times, that you want to avoid generic combat on 2-1 just because there's no real strong situation that it makes sense. I will talk about augment categories. There are exceptions to that. So like, let's say scaling augment, scaling combat, like pumping up, or like no scout, no pivot. But I would not bucket that under the category of generic combat, like inspiring epitaph or something like that. So if you're medium strong, let's say you don't have 2 stars, or you have 1 2-star in like mediocre slammable item, or you have multiple pairs in like a slammable item, then you kind of take this hybrid approach between whether you're strong and whether you're weak. And it's useful to also scout the lobby to see how strong your opponents are. If your opponents are very weak and don't have many pairs, then you can kind of shift more in this direction. Whereas even if you have multiple pairs and slammable items, but many of your opponents have, 2 stars with slammable items, then you are probably more on the weak side and you want to go towards this direction. So this is kind of the middle ground. And if you're weak, that is, you have like 0 pairs, maybe you only have 1 pair, no 2 stars, and even if you have a 2-star but no slammable items, you're probably weak too. In that case, you want to lean towards picking an augment that gives you econ or direction. And in general, you want to avoid generic combat. So the augment categories here, econ gives you flexibility because you can lean towards reroll, you can go towards fast 8. If you are considering reroll, like let's say, too much value or trade sector or something, you really want to scout to see what lines are available versus contested, since that might lean you towards reroll if you're uncontested, or maybe away from reroll if you are contested. Another question for reroll is, do we have extra items? And this is influenced by the encounters, right? So like Jace or Vi encounter have component anvils, and when you have extra items, then it makes econ more valuable because it's stronger on reroll. This is a concept that Disha talks about a lot. It's stronger on reroll since you can get a fully itemized carry by 3-1 or 3-2 at the latest, oftentimes earlier. And that lets you not sack as much HP, or even could allow you to full streak, and have the goal to hit your rerolls ahead of reroll 3 stars ahead of tempo, which gives you a very good, like easy top 4, if not allowing you to play for higher cap than you usually would in non item encounters. In general, we can ask, are we weak? If we are weak, then econ gives us more flexibility to like push fast 8. Is the patch imbalanced? If a fast 8 line is imbalanced, then econ is particularly strong so that you can get there first. So this is like in that scrap patch where scrap was really strong and you could just lost streak and prioritize econ early game. And if the fast 8 line can actually have win out potential, then you can actually lost streak. But like right now, the game is pretty balanced and there's no fast 8 lines that have significant win out potential, then econ isn't necessarily as strong, though it's still very good when you are weak in the early game. As far as items go, normal item gives you tempo, so that's the case where you want, if you're strong, then you want to consider a normal item. Can we play for 5 streak? Do we have 2-star units with slammable items to make a 2-3 item carry quickly? So not only part of this question is and a degree of whether you're strong, also is flammable item plus flexible item component, flexible open item component. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a 2-star tank with like, or let's say you have a 2-star, I don't know, 2-star AP carry with let's say rod, glove, tier. Then you could slam JG open tier, which is very good. But if you have like rod, glove, this is less flexible, right? Slam JG open glove, less flexible. I mean, glove is decently flexible because you could slam like guard breaker. Like, let's say it's like, I don't know, like vest. I mean, vest is okay too, because so the key idea here is that if you're going to full streak, oftentimes you will get last carousel priority because you won the first few games if everything goes according to plan, which means that you are less likely to have as many options to slam a good second item. And so even if you win the first 3 rounds, if you can't slam a good second item, then that decreases the likelihood that you can win 2-5 and 2-6. And so then it decreases the value of this, your ability to get this full 10 gold, right? Since you will get lower carousel priority. All right. Are there S tier late game comps that benefit from excess items? So Scrap in that one patch that was very good. For Emissary, when it was strong, although that was never really the case this set. But there are certain like late game comps where you have a lot of 4-cost units that can be carries. And in that case, like having extra items can benefit from him, or if there's a trait that benefits from extra items like Scrap, then you can also lean in this direction. Items, artifacts leans to reroll usually, since they get magnified by having like, basically an artifact is the equivalent of like 1.5 to 2 items in one. So make sure you scout to see what lines are available versus contested. Like let's say you have the option of picking a ranged artifact to play Nocturne reroll. You should actively scout first to see if that line is already taken. And Dankmemes actually had a game where he was trying to decide whether to take, I believe, Portable Forge or not, or maybe it was Dish Soap, to take Portable Forge or not, and decided, and he had a good spot, I think, for artifacts, but he first scouted and found that someone was playing Smeech, or heavily leaning towards Smeech, or maybe it was Nocturne, and then decided not to take the artifact because one of the lines was contested. And do we already have units that are particularly strong with artifacts? So if you were already holding Nocturne, like you have Nocturne pair, then it makes picking an artifact stronger, because you can hit a Nocturne 2 pretty early if you hit a ranged artifact. Emblem can give us direction. Are we weak and or lack direction? Are we playing on an encounter that already has emblems, or drops spats and pans? So if you're playing on like Loot Sub, or you're playing on Ambessa encounter, then the possibility of getting like a +2 makes this very strong. Especially if you already have like a Rebel emblem from Ambessa, then getting another Rebel emblem is like instant win. The other thing with emblems is you really want to make sure to actively scout if you're leaning a certain direction. Like let's say you're considering taking a family emblem, you want to make sure you scout the lobby to make sure you're not contested, because it just makes your game a lot more narrow. You basically have to commit to that line, and if you're contested, it makes your game plan very hard. All right, combat. You can consider scaling combat if you are weak. So are there imbalanced scaling lines available? Pumping up for like Zeri in that one patch where Zeri was very strong, or no scout, no pivot. If you have the right units in the beginning. Investment strategy if you're on an econ encounter. So scaling, if there's strong lines combined with the scaling, can be very good if you're weak in the early game. Non-scaling is usually not great. We talked about generic combat, since items are usually going to be stronger at magnifying 2-star units in the early game. So generic non-scaling combat augments are going to be better in the late game, because oftentimes they apply to your whole team. And when you only have 3 or 4 units, they're not going to be as strong as if you have 8 or 9 units in, right? So they're just not as good for early game strength. And then finally, trait-specific combat augments. You really have to have a good setup and hopefully be uncontested, unless that trait is broken at the start of a patch or set. But then it is likely to be contested, so you still want to make sure you actively scout. And then hero augments. Do we have extra augments? So if we're playing on like a Vi encounter or Jace encounter, then hero augments are a lot stronger since they're preferred on those encounters. Dishub talked about this a lot. Do we have good slammable items and a good open component? Because we want a 3-item 2-star hero unit by 3/2 for 2 costs, and ideally earlier for 1 cost, because that allows you to streak, which generates gold, preserves HP, lets you hit your 3-star ahead of tempo, and play for a higher placement. And then lastly, do we already have a bunch of copies of the desired unit plus their supporting cast? If we do, then we're more likely to take the hero augment. Lastly, we have lost streak augments, so like what doesn't kill you, HP generation augments, which kind of depends on whether we have cash out trait units. So like in this set, it's Ken Baron or Fortune.
The connection. Please try again in a moment.
Oh, my computer got triggered. And it depends on whether the cash out trait is strong in a certain patch or not. And if so, then lost streak augments can be very good. All right, so we'll go into encounters. On Mbessa encounter, and whether or not these encounters stick around for next set or not, I assume some of them will be modified. But these general ideas around thinking around how your augment selection differs depending on what circumstances change about the individual game that you are playing on is still relevant. So when you already have emblems, greeting for Exodia vertical traits can make sense. So you're more likely to roll, like let's say you already have a Rebel emblem and you need +2 to hit like the highest cap of that trait, then you're more likely to greed and roll for like another Rebel emblem. And there are situations where maybe you feel like, oh, this augment is good enough, and the other 2 augments are like, okay, but you would prioritize, this pick, right? But if you have the possibility of going for the emblem, then you would still roll this to play for that high cap, because these augments are like okay, but this augment's only like 5% better than these 2. But if you roll into the +2 emblem, like that's like 10x better than these 2, right? So it can be worth greeting when you're deciding what to roll. Caitlin, if you have extra gold, it can benefit augments that scale with gold. So like investment strategy, hedge fund. So that's something to keep in mind. It also helps reroll, which means in this case, you actually might lean toward picking item augments to kind of balance. Since in general, if you have extra gold already, you want more item or combat. If you have more items already, like Vi encounter, then you want more gold. So it's just finding the right balance, right? Diminishing returns if you already have gold. You don't necessarily want to pick more gold. Although there are exceptions to that rule. Like, for example, if Fast 8 is the dominant strategy. Prismatic, like not too impactful on augment selection. I guess one thing, if all prismatic, then keep in mind tempo will be high entire game, meaning you're more likely to lose HP in early game. So scaling augments are tougher, just because you're gonna, lose a lot more HP. Jace artifact. Usually you don't need more items, so team combat isn't great at 2-1, which means econ is going to be better, which helps for reroll. So you really want to prioritize econ. Same idea for Vi encounter. Jinx, you're gonna have more resources similar to Caitlyn, so many of these same ideas apply for Scuttle or Crabgrave. Mel, loot at 40 HP, benefits delayed strength and scaling augments. So what doesn't kill you, pumping up, cash out traits like Ken Baron or Fortune. Savika loot sub benefits emblem augments, so you can play for Exodia. This also just gives you more resources, so but the resources can kind of be mixed between gold and items, so it's kind of more generalized. Vander gold augments have the most econ augments compared to silver or prismatic. So you are more able to pick econ augments at 2-1 since there's just more options, which means you could be more likely to try and make 10 gold in stage 1, planning around kind of the Vander. Phi component anvil similar to Jace, you want to prioritize econ and you really want to lean towards reroll lines if possible. 6 costs appearing earlier. I don't think 6 costs are coming back for set 14, so not too much impact. Econ is slightly more valuable so that you have more gold to roll in stage 4 to high roll the 6 cost. Warwick, you do want to prioritize immediate strength augments, which usually means items are going to be stronger here because being stronger in the early game with those items will generate you more gold. Killing units generates gold, which gives you econ, right? Wind Up Monkey, there's a slight preference to prioritizing immediate strength since there's a chance that you take, I think it was like 10 or 15 HP with powder. So something to keep in mind. All right, so now that leads us into the VOD review section where I'm going to go through a bunch of games with Dankmemes and Dish Soap from their regionals final day. So game 1 was no encounter. In this case, he's kind of medium to weak because he does have 2 pairs. The item's not great. It could be JG open bow on Lux 2 or Rage Blade open glove, which is not as good. But usually the other thing to keep in mind is whether your pairs or 2 stars like kind of have matching synergies. Like I talked about this in my stage 1 video around how many degrees away units are depending on their traits. So Lux is 2 degrees away from Darius because they're connected by Vladimir. Since Vladimir is a sorcerer watcher and Darius is a watcher and Lux is a sorcerer, whereas there is not that connection. Singed is more than 2 degrees away from Lux, which means that even if you had the Singed 2, it would not be as strong of a board and your ability to like full streak stage 2. So I would say this is a more of a medium to weak situation, which means you want to lean towards econ and direction. So these are kind of the options that came up. Left probably is going to be the best for econ and flexibility, since Shop Glitch, we don't really have a great spot for reroll right now. Ideally, you want to have some of the units already in a kind of a clear direction. So now he rolled middle, and middle can give us direction with family. We only have 1-2 units for family, but we could slam Rageblade Glove, which is actually pretty good. So that's an option. He rolls right and gets Slammin', and Slammin' is stronger than Epic since it gives you an extra component, and I believe scales more or about the same as Epic. Actually, I think slightly more, right? Because this gives you 6 XP plus 2 free rerolls is equivalent of 10 XP or 10 gold, whereas per round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gives you 12, right? So this gives you 2 more gold equivalent per round plus an extra end component, though you do have to slam. So going back to the fact that we're medium weak, Dankmemes picks Slammin' to give him more flexibility with econ. That's game 1. Game 2, all prismatic. In this case, we do have 1 2-star, but not really a great front line. So I would say we're medium weak. The items we could slam Morello open tier. or Archangel Open Belt. Archangel really limits like our options, so that's not as great since it's really like Heimer, maybe like Rebel Zoe. And Redemption isn't great because we don't have a good 2-star tank. So like we're like, I would say we're medium strength. So here, because we're medium weak, we want Econ and Direction again. Mogul's Mail's better if we have a 2-star tank and slammable tank items. Build the Buzz just like okay, so I'd probably roll middle and right. He rolls middle, which Dominator Crown definitely gives us direction, which is what we're looking for. And we already have a Blitzcrank, so that's pretty strong, and we could just play towards like a Dominator, Black Rose Dominator Silco line. And then he rolls right, gets level up, which is probably slightly better than Shopping Spree. Even if you thought Shopping Spree was roughly equivalent or slightly better, you probably still roll this in case you can get something significantly better. He gets expected unexpectedness and decides to go with Dominator Crown. Again, we decided in the beginning that we were kind of medium weak. And so we wanted Econ or Direction, and the Dominator Crown really helps us get direction. Game 3 is Component Anvils. So we want to lean towards reroll, which means we want Econ since we already have extra items. We do have a bunch of items. We only have a Trundle pair and a Maddie pair. So I would say we're kind of weak because we don't really have like a clear path forward, and most of our units are Conquerors right now. So we want to lean towards Econ, ideally over Direction. And from here, we have Bruiser and Tower Defense can give us direction. Pandora's, we already have a lot of items, so I think rolling right seems very obvious. You got BRB, which again, we don't really want more items, so which leaves us with these two. Given that we already have the Bruiser pair, we have open bow and slammable Redemption. We can basically play towards Twitch because Redemption's really good with Bruisers, and Twitch wants lots of bows and like Rage Blade and Red Buff. So Bruiser emblem probably is better than a random emblem for direction. And then he rolls left, gets Scoreboard Scrapper, which could be okay, but with extra item components, you're going to take extra damage since it's a higher tempo lobby. And so that Bruiser emblem gives you clear direction. So the summary here is he's medium weak, wants to lean towards Econ or Direction, doesn't really have a clear Econ Augment option, so he goes with Direction towards Bruiser Twitch. All right, so this encounter is all gold. He is, again, medium weak, which means he wants Econ or Direction. He has kind of a family option going with Rageblade slammable with Open Glove. But the thing with slamming Rageblade, even if he hits Darius 2, is he has no frontline pairs, which means that you're still unlikely to full streak stage 2. And Rageblade really needs to have strong tanks in order to win fights. So I would say he's leaning towards the medium weak direction, which means he wants Econ or Direction. Rocket Collection is Direction, but it's not very good. He could get the if this augment were actually balanced, like Rageblade Open Glove could be good on Tristana, but not right now. Patient Study is probably the most flexible with Econ, and since it's weak, it would give him more Econ than usual. Pilfer is Econ, but it's not as good because he's not really set up to guarantee that he can kill units. So he rolls left and middle and gets Cloning Facility and Wandering Trainer. Cloning Facility is kind of like team combat a little bit, and he has no 2-stars, so this is not great. And Wandering Trainer is great in giving you direction and flexibility, which is probably better than Patient Study in this case, because Patient Study is kind of like a mid-tier Econ Augment. He rolls right, gets Starry Night. So now is an option between Direction versus Econ. And again, he had that family reroll angle, right? Which would be pretty solid with Starry Night. But you really need to scout. He can also go Tristana, by the way, with these items with Rageblade, Open Glove, or the Darius. But he ends up scouting, and this is the game, if you haven't seen it already, Dish Soap has a Tristana 2 already with a slammable IE. So that removes the Tristana out. And then Bio and Prestimate were both holding family units. So when he found that those family reroll angles were contested, he decides to go with Wandering Trainer. If he found that neither of those paths with reroll were contested, then he probably would have actively considered Starry Night. All right, game 5. Component Anvils with Vi. He's medium strength with extra items. In this case, he already has Step Pair, Darius Pair, Amumu Pair, so lots of pairs. And if he can hit something, and actually Vex Pair too, and very flexible with itemization since he has a bunch of item components. So I would actually say this is like medium strong scenario since his odds of hitting a 2-star are pretty high. And here, right off the bat, left and right are probably rerolls since it's not guaranteed that you're going to be strong. If you already had a bunch of 2-stars, like 2 to 3 2-stars, then maybe you'd be more likely to consider this. You have a bunch of pairs, so you don't want delayed scaling combat. He rolled right and left. Combat Medic as an option. He already has a Step Pair with likely slammable items. So this is a very clear pick for Hero Augment. And we talked about in the encounter section that when you have extra item components, Hero Augments become very strong. All right, game 6. He is medium strength here. He hit the Maddie 2. It's like questionable whether you want to slam a QSS with open rod. So I would even say this is like medium to weak. Because he also doesn't have any 2-star frontline, though Swain as a frontline is like medium strong, but he really does need kind of like Sorcerer and Form Swapper to really increase his tankiness. And no like, well, I guess he has the Bruisers here, but no 2-star, right? So it's like kind of like medium strength, meaning that I would lean towards Econ here. He gets Direction here, which is not great. Scapegoat can be Econ, but Starry Night is going to be better for Econ. He rolls middle, gets Trade Sector, which is probably inferior to Starry Night. He scouts the lobby to see what viable Starry Night lines are open. Coming back here, he does have a Morgana pair, which with AP is actually decently viable. Downside is he doesn't have any tiers, which would be decent for Starry Night. His items aren't really that great for 1 and 2 cost reroll, since he doesn't have any family units or Tristana already. So he also sees that Dish Soap has heavy leaning towards family already, which removes that as an option for Starry Night. So he ends up rolling right, rolling Starry Night since only Tristana line is open, which isn't great with his Glove Rod Cloak and no Tristana to get stacks in the neutral rounds in stage 1. He gets Shop Glitch, and so, which could be good with like Smeech or Quick Strikers, but he doesn't have slammable items or those units in that direction right now. So he ends up picking Scapegoat as just a generic gold generation, plus some like combat in the form of a tank. All right. So this video is going on a little bit longer than I expected. So I'm not going to go into Dish Soap's games because I did kind of cover this in my Dish Soap tournament review. But if you want to take a look at this page yourself, I will provide a link to this note page in the description below. But the general principles are the same. When he's strong and has a slammable item, he wants to lean towards items. When he's medium strength, in this case, he eliminated bad options. Strong, go towards item. component ammos with Vi went towards econ. And when he was weak and no slam, he picked direction-based augment. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope that you're able to practice gratitude in your own games and in your life. I would love to hear your thoughts on both the meta mindset of the day, gratitude, as well as any feedback on this augment guide, comments, questions that you thought was useful, any additional feedback, maybe that I got something wrong or there's additional thought processes that I should have considered. And I would also love if you have future ideas on meta mindset topics or on guides, since I'm trying to focus on more generic fundamental guides right now as we're approaching kind of the end of the set. That is going to be useful for set 14 in preparation there. So I'd love to again hear your feedback in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.